Welcome back to Esther Alexis, Body of an Extrovert. Today I am joined by my incredible, immaculate, Nigerian, Christian friend, Margaret Obiana Jew. Do you want your full government out there?
No. No.
You know what it is? I want people to remember the full name, because when you change the world one day, I want them to be like, nah, I knew her since Body of an Extrovert. So I kind of want them to hear the full name, but I'm going to bleep out at least the last name.
Okay.
Respect. So that,
all right. Okay.
I feel like
beautiful.
They'll put the two together, though.
Perfect.
They'll figure out who it is. But
it's cool, but the last
give me something. Like, they might look up the social like, and got her. Like, no, I just want people to know. Like, I want you to know that this is where you heard the name first, because if there's one thing I know for certain, it's that Jesus is my Lord and Savior.
Oh, hallelujah.
The second thing I know for certain is that Margaret's not about to be among the common folk for long. Margaret is shocked right now. I just know. No, genuinely, honestly speaking, I don't know what your contribution will be to the global impact in the world, but I just feel like it's going to be great and it's coming soon, so stay tuned.
Ooh, amen. I will receive it.
Come on, somebody.
I will claim it in the name of Jesus.
Come on. Claim it, receive it. And after all of that, I mean, I could ask you to introduce yourself, but I feel like
you just did.
See, and I feel like, though, people want to know, like, who is Margaret? Because we often talk about you on GSM. If you guys are not following, you need to be following the Girl Sis Man podcast, which is a podcast that I do with my lovely friend Lola, who y'all have met on several occasions. And we're always talking about our invisible friend Margaret, who is not invisible today. And I'm like, I'm just so glad that people can see you and know that it's not an imaginary friend we're speaking about. Margaret is a blogger, a photographer, a sister, a friend, a daughter, an incredible employee who I am sure is being overlooked, because the best of us do get overlooked. Somebody, come on.
True.
And she's also a social worker.
Yes.
And I think that that's very important because of the topic that we're going to be discussing today. But before we get into that topic, I'm going to ask questions so that the audience can get to know you more. Okay. I feel like that's the easiest way to do it. Okay. Just be loose with it.
Okay.
Free ball it, as honest as you can be. And if you don't want to answer something, be like, skip. That's okay.
Okay.
All right. So how are you doing today for real?
For real.
For real, for real.
Today, I am scatterbrained. Work is stressful. I had to rush to get ready to come here today.
Yeah.
But once I got in the car, I was like, okay, you've achieved what you needed to do, Margaret. You got it. Like, you on the road. And I was hustling on Route 8.
I believe it.
Look, the police, if they saw me today, it would have been me.
First
It would have been.
all, I feel like there's a blessing over your life with not getting pulled over.
Oh, it's definitely a blessing over my life, because the way I was hitting the gas on Route 8, I said, Margaret, you're already in the car. Before I knew it, I had 15 minutes to get here, and I had just left.
Listen, let me tell you something,
It was not okay.
I'm afraid that anointing has been removed from my life, because I don't even put my foot on the gas. I get ready to tow the gas, and all I hear is whoop whoop, and I'm like, whoop. And I be like, I'm scared, y'all. I got a ticket a few months ago. Margaret was in the car when I got this ticket.
I woke up, I said, the lights.
Yo, and I got pulled over with you again.
It's not me, because I have the anointing.
You do. Yo, you know what it is? I must have lost my anointing.
I think God is tired.
I think he's like, you're doing too much.
Yeah.
You're taking my blessings for granted. Because earnestly, I paid my fine to society. But don't ever say that I'm a bad person, because I was really looking at that cop in the eye and I had so much I wanted to say. But I was like, justice, Esther, justice and empathy. He's doing his job.
He definitely should have let you. Like, he knew.
It was quota season. I'm sure he was down 15,000 tickets, and he said, I'm going to unload one on her.
But I'm going to respect myself home.
Come on.
I am.
Do it. All right, next question. And I like this question so much because I asked it to Rotisha a week ago. So I'm just going to keep asking it when I go forward. Who did you want to be like when you were younger?
Funny enough, I was listening to the episode yesterday and I was like, oh, what an interesting question. Like,
I think it tells so much about someone.
Who did I want to be when I was younger? That's such a weird question for me because I feel like I didn't want to be anyone.
Really?
No, I'm so serious. I don't think there was anybody I really wanted to be. I just wanted to be like not me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But no one in particular.
She was just like anybody who's not me right now.
Yes, anyone that's not me.
Not your siblings.
Not my. Oh, definitely not them.
No, not like that. But like, because I feel like siblings live very similar lives.
Oh yeah.
So you were probably just like, yeah, I don't.
No,
want
I didn't. No,
resembling this
nobody.
at all.
None. I didn't want to be in the same situation. I didn't want to be with the same people. I wanted to be somebody else.
Redo. I want to do something else.
Take me back, Lord.
That's a very interesting answer. Okay. Last but not least, what was your perspective on mental health growing up versus now?
Wow. When I was younger, I always thought about mental health as like just being what it was. Like you were just either like very sound of mind or you were very like,
Unwell.
Scattered, unwell, or you were just kind of like generally like ill at ease. I always thought it just depends on the person. Whereas now I understand that there's so much nuance to it. You can be wonderful in some seasons, right? And then in other seasons you need some support. And what I found with my own mental health journey is that, you can have anxiety and then you can be like an anxious person and it's not necessarily the same thing. And I found out that for me, I'm an anxious person, but like I never would have known that about myself. And also I feel like for the diaspora and like just ethnic people in general, we really do ourselves a disservice by not allowing ourselves to explore mental health and mental wellness. Because there's so many ways that we can really improve and enrich our lives if we take the time to really like solidify our mental, to come into ourselves, to forgive our traumas, or even if you don't forgive it, to figure out ways to move on from it. And I've just been learning every single day in my adulthood that I get to choose who I want to be and how I want to behave and how I want to look at every situation every single day. Like no one takes that choice from me. I get to choose it. And I learned that in therapy. So
that is actually very well articulated. Like I'm glad I asked the question now because at first I was like, is this going to be a question that I care for? And I'm very glad that I asked. So here's the introduction that, is on top of the other introductions that I gave. So Margaret and I met in high school, which is very ironic because I swore I was going to be one of those people who didn't have high school friends when they were adults. Like I was one of those, like I'm leaving you bumpkins in the back, like I'm done. But that's obviously not what has happened. And I'm like so glad for it. So Margaret was a transfer into our high school. And when you're a transfer student, like you get the alienation, like you get the cold shoulder, you're isolated because you don't know everyone. Like you don't really get, like you don't get the vibe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Literally walked into English Lit. It's like literally, was it like 6 or 8 students?
I think it was like 8.
That was it.
There was nobody in there.
So I sit behind Margaret and she immediately turns around. Mind you, I've never talked to this girl a day in my life. And she goes, yeah, we're the only 2 black people in this class, so we're going to be friends, okay? I just busted out laughing. I was like, yeah, actually, yeah, that makes complete and total sense. And it was the best decision that I ever made. Yes. Like, I don't even think I made that decision. Margaret made the decision for me. Okay?
I made the decision.
Actually, yeah, looking back, it was the best decision that was not in my control.
I made an executive decision.
Yeah.
For the both of us that we were going to be united.
And you know what, though? I'm glad it went that way.
So true. But you know what? I'm really, really, really grateful for the discernment that God gave me with selecting my friends.
Yeah, you have a good one with that.
I just zero in and I'm like, she's the one. And don't get me wrong, we were the only black girls, but in my mind, I'm like, she's the one.
No, it worked out, y'all. It worked out. And so for the last It's been over 10 years now because we
Yeah.
graduated 10 years
We
ago.
aging ourselves.
Girl. So it's been like 12, I want to say 12, 13-ish years. And let me just say that Margaret has been one of the most influential, most impactful persons in my life in every stage in my life without knowing it. And I think, no, honestly, like I'm are you getting ready to cry? Don't do this. It is. No, but I say that and I mean that so seriously because I think that it's great that you have friends that will see you through life, but not everyone sees you through every season. And it's like, I'm not even joking, but I don't take that lightly to the point in which like, I literally pray, like, I literally pray that I am as good a friend to you as you have been to me.
I genuinely think of those times, and first of all, it's likewise. Like, you mean so much to me. I don't even want to talk about it because I will cry, so let me not even, we can talk about it off camera.
Yep.
But you mean so much to me, and you're somebody that I always, like, I just care so much about you. And, like, when I ask you how you are, I always, like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes I'll be like, how are you? And I'm like, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Like,
I don't care, girl. It's a nicety.
But, like, you're somebody that I'm always like, how is Esther doing? Like, I'm like, I need to check on Esther. Like, first of all, it just came to me, like, yesterday. I was like, I ain't talked to Esther. I'm like, she good? Like, we good? What's going on?
I've been busy, child.
I know. But that's my thing. I feel like I'm always, like, very attuned to your emotions, weirdly enough, but I'm always like, I feel like Esther, like, I'd be like, you know, like when somebody's like, it smells like rain. I'm like, it feels like Esther needs me for something.
Yo, you have good discernment, bro.
It's weird, but it's just like, you just matter to me a lot. I don't know, God just like, I'm telling you, like, boo, like a light just pull up over your head when I met you. And I said, that's the one.
That's crazy, girl, because I was not a light in high school, girl.
No, you weren't. But, like, in my mind, I just knew, like, I wanted to know you. And throughout all of the time that we've been knowing each other, I just knew I wanted to have you in my life. And I just knew that you were a presence that I really wanted to keep. And I'm really grateful that, like, even when I slip and I'm, like, all over the place, Esther be like, hey, Margaret, what's up? Da-da-da. She just starts sending me, like, this stream of consciousness. And it's so good for me and it's so grounding. And, like, I'm just so grateful that you're even open with me because I know you're not. Like, I know you don't give that side of yourself to a lot of people, but it means a lot to me. I love you a lot. So
thank you. And thank you for coming. So, like, I asked Margaret to be here today because one of the topics I've really wanted to discuss recently is empathy. Mm-hmm. And I say that because, like, it's been an enigma for me. Like, I've been struggling to understand why empathy lately has been so hard to find, like in people, in others, especially in others. And I think a great example of this, like, would be like the Titanic and the submarine situation, right? Like, if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, I'm sure that you haven't. You know that there was a submarine type vessel. People are not classifying it as a submarine because it was very poorly built. You know, they went, five people were on board and they went down to explore the remains of the Titanic, and unfortunately it imploded. But it came at a harrowing price of $250,000 per person. Right? And it was revealed that these people are people of wealth and of significance financially. And when I heard this, when they were lost at sea, I'm not going to lie, I didn't give much attention to it because I just thought they're going to be found, you know? Yeah. When it was revealed that they were not going to be found, at least alive, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Yeah. And the internet did not echo that sentiment. No. It was very much, these billionaires went down there and they're just throwing away their money. That's what they get. That's, you know, they're like, there's no empathy. There was just such a lack of empathy that it left me in awe. Like, because I'm like, at the end of the day, we come from someone, right? We come from families. We know people. We've interacted with people. And to see people be unable to empathize in that moment with those who were lost, those who have lost someone, it shocked me. And so I'll start this interview by saying, like, what is empathy? Because you're a social worker. I feel like you have the degree for this. Y'all, she went to Penn, the Ivy League school. All right? So buckle your seatbelt seatbelts in. No, just kidding. Relieve the pressure. Relieve the pressure.
Me like, wait a minute. Don't unbuckle them. Unbuckle them.
Like, you're safe. You're good here. No.
Empathy, at a bare minimum is really the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and not just like, abstractly think, how must they have felt? No, you put yourself in their shoes and think to yourself, how would I have felt if it was me? If I was in this situation, what would I do? How would I behave? Because typically when you do that, you're going to think about things very differently than if you're just like the outsider looking in, making a judgment.
Do you think that human beings have a natural inclination towards empathy, or do you think that it depends on certain factors?
I wish I could give a straight answer, but I think it's really like a both and. I think, before the fall, before my good sis Eve ate that apple, we probably did have like a native inclination towards empathy. But I think now it's not as easy. I don't think it's as clear cut. I think it's really a nature versus nurture kind of thing. It depends on how you're raised. If your parents raise you with a gentle but firm hand and they teach you that you can make mistakes but we'll still love you, or they teach you that, everyone makes mistakes but like don't judge people based on what they do today, judge them based on how you've known them. Perhaps, but I think it really depends because a lot of the times we don't necessarily look at things like that. We're looking at things just clear cut and dry of what happened. Like, we're thinking, these are billionaires, like they're wasting their money. But like, what if you, took a trip to like the Jersey Shore or something and somebody T-boned you and like 3 of your family members died and you were the driver and you're the only person who survived? Or like, you weren't even in the car and everyone in the car died and you're the person at home receiving the news that your family's gone. How would you behave? You know what I mean? Like, think about it from the spectrum of like, no, it's not the same. But if it were me and I lost my family and I lost someone who like they thought they were going to come back, right? And then they didn't, you would probably think about it very differently. But I don't think that that's inherently easy for a lot of people because we don't necessarily give people many chances in this life. I think a lot of the times we're not necessarily raising ourselves or raising our children to really think about, how do you know a person? How do you think about them versus like a mistake that they made? I think a lot of the times we hone in on the mistakes and not the people.
I love that you've said that. And one thing I'm gonna focus on too, just because I'm very interested in how you think socioeconomic factors impact it directly. Because something that, and I don't even know if you picked it up, but something that people have been saying, and I've even caught myself saying it, is a bunch of billionaires were on this ship. They don't have names. Yeah. They don't have identities outside of billionaires. And so part of me wonders, are we unable, at least in this particular circumstance, to empathize because there's a socioeconomic gap of experiences, of life lived, and how we perceive human beings to be?
Of course. I think it is incredibly difficult to look at someone who is from a completely different economic background than yourself and to be able to resonate with them. It's like it takes a high level of emotional intelligence to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And it goes both ways. It goes for if you're very wealthy and you're trying to empathize with someone who is impoverished, or if you're impoverished trying to empathize with someone who's very wealthy. It goes both ways.
I'm gonna stop you there real quick. I'm gonna let you keep going, but I think that's important to point out, and I say that because a lot of people bring up the refugee ship, right, that went missing, I think the week prior, that sunk, and people went missing. There are people who are being found right now, they're deceased, and it's so funny to me that people are now bringing up, well, what about these poor people? I'm like, were they a topic of interest for you before or after the Titanic?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But with the submarine sinking. And I'm like, now we're able to be like, well, look at these poor refugees. And I'm like, but no one really bought that up until these quote unquote billionaires sunk. And I think that it's funny because I'm like, you can empathize with those people today because they're the nearest relation to your experience, but you can't empathize with this group because maybe they're too far from your imagination. I just... Go ahead. Sorry.
I think, to your point, it is really easy to make that point. Like, there were these refugees who were fleeing to Greece, right? They were looking for safety. They were looking for new opportunity, and they perished. It's like startlingly disturbing. And I think it resonates with a lot of people, and especially resonates with me because I'm also a child of immigrants, right? Whereas, people who willingly got into this submersible to go like 20 buildings under the ocean, I mean, it doesn't necessarily resonate the same, but at the end of the day, loss of life is loss of life. And I think that, for our communities, we would do better if we would be able to kind of bridge the gap sometimes. Unfortunately, I'm going to be honest here, that migrant ship, we probably would have never heard about that. Like, let's be very clear. It became a topic of conversation because we juxtaposed it with our response to the submersible going under. But we have to be very, very clear that we're playing into a bigger narrative of I don't want to say disgracing, but kind of what is the word? We're playing into a bigger narrative of people who want to really diminish people of color, who don't want us to necessarily know what people are experiencing on the other side. Especially, let's also consider that a lot of the migrants on that boat were Muslim. And we have to also remember that the American culture around Islam is generally very, very bad. We have a very negative understanding and connotation as it pertains to that religion and that faith. So we were never going to publicize that, right? How often do we talk about anything going on with people? How often do we actually talk about that side of the world?
We don't.
It's not often unless we're talking about war.
Yeah.
Right? So the reason why they juxtaposed it was kind of to say, to bait us and to say, well, look what they're doing. There are these poor people on this ship, and we're sending out like the Coast Guard for these wealthy people, right? Which we did. And America is going to be responsible to pay for that, right? Like we did send, and France sent out people, and Canada sent out people. Did anybody send out people for the people in Greece? I don't think so.
Not that I've heard of, yeah.
First of all, the Greek police are trying to say, they're basically like, we did what we could. We don't know what you're talking about. So I think that there's a larger narrative at play here when we discuss this topic. But like to your point, people probably wouldn't have mentioned that in the same way because we wouldn't have been talking about it. That being said, it is still true that there was a vastly different response to these two crises. And the reality of the situation is there were more people on that migrant ship than there were in that submersible. The loss of hundreds
of lives
versus the loss of 5 people, right? Like I'm not saying that, we should like damn the 5 people. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it doesn't compare. But because of the financial, I won't even say, actually, like, let's be very clear. That submersible was owned by, I think, OceanGate is the name.
Yep.
God only knows what contracts that company has with we don't even know if they have contracts with the federal government. We don't know what their relationship to the government is. But let's be clear, these people probably have connections that got them a quicker response. Those migrants don't have the same connections. It's a much larger issue than it is at the surface level. And if we're going to name one element of it, we need to name them all, right? And I think that we need to be clear that no one should be perishing. This is a travesty on both accounts. And I think that that's where we're missing, the empathy. But I also think, a lot of the time, it's really, really hard for people to distinguish what the media is telling us versus the larger narrative at play, because the media is only showing us what serves their purposes and their narrative. And I'm not saying that to sound like a red pill kind of person. That's not what I'm saying.
Girl,
but like we need to be very, very mindful of what we're taking in and what we're willing to use as ammunition.
You know, it's funny that you say that in regards to what we perceive and what actually is. And I say that because I was having this conversation before I even bought it here with my friend Jacques. And he said, if you look at the responses, the greater response to the submersible imploding, it is predominantly negative, right? From at least the middle class and below, I will say. And he was like, you know, as you go into this topic to have this conversation, he's like, I encourage you to look at not the noise, but the signal, right? Yes, people are laughing. People are being, you know, for lack of a better word, just mean, cold-hearted. Like, it's sad. But he was like, but notice who they are, right? And what they're actually saying. Because I want to believe anyway, that I don't think that anyone is saying, loss of life, ha ha ha. What they're actually saying is, he was like, maybe the loss of unfairness, because we perceive wealth a certain way, which is, are they those who are making money off the back of minorities? Are they those who are making money off of the working class? Because the working class, back in the day, your CEO is making maybe 30, 40 more than you. Now they're out earning you by
they're
your
making
own
three
salary.
people's salaries.
3-4 people's salary. And that's not even touching bonus, etc. Right? Mind you, that's off of your work. So he was like, so is it that the working class, the middle class lack empathy, or they're just so tired, you know, of being overworked, undervalued? Like, their lives are undervalued because their dollar amount is not high enough. That when they see someone of a higher dollar amount, of a higher estimation of value, that they're unable to look within themselves and be like, I'm sad for that.
I mean, definitely. Jacques is 100% right. This is a cry for help. Like, let's not negate the fact that even if people are like, first of all, even if we're laughing and kikiing and ha-haing, it's never like, there's always an underlying tone to that. And people are tired. People are hungry. People are struggling. People are suffering.
Yes.
And
in America.
In America.
Not even just these refugees, like people
we're
here.
Suffering. Right now. And I think it is incredibly difficult to be suffering at such an immense level, and then to hear that people willingly paid $250,000 and signed their lives away, because the first page of the contract to get on that submersible literally says that you can die.
It saddens me because it doesn't take away from the travesty. But I feel like we've come to a place in society where we're losing bits of our humanity. We're losing our ability to connect because the gap is just growing and growing and growing.
It's definitely... It is becoming increasingly difficult to connect with people on the other side of the aisle, but that is intentional.
Why do you think it's intentional?
You know, I think... Have you ever heard of social Darwinism?
Yes, but go ahead and refresh my mind.
So, I think that this is more of a game of survival of the fittest right now. I could be very much, a naysayer, but I do believe that, I think that right now the government is catering to the 1%.
Absolutely.
The wealthy win, and there's so little wealthy people in this country. And that's at the demise of those at the end of the spectrum who are, of lower income. And I think it's intentional, right? I think that the goal is that the people of lower income, I don't want to be as, negative as to say die off, but essentially, lose hope enough to just stop fighting so that the 1% can continue to win. I think that they're really the divide, right? The socioeconomic divide, right, is set up so that you would believe, because this is based on the American dream of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right, that you can succeed, and it's on you as an individual. Like, the government is very much fueling this idea that you need to make yourself successful. And if you are not successful, it is your fault. Not that it is a failing of society, not that it is a failing of your family, or not that it's a failing of, like, you know, the government. No, it's on you as an individual. I think that that's very, very, very much heavy in our current state of politics. I think that unfortunately people are beginning to believe that, whereas in reality, I think the government has a lot more. I think the government should play somewhat of a larger role in allowing people to sustain better lives for themselves. I'm not going to say, you know, they need to be in charge of everything, because I don't think they do. But I do think that there are a lot of barriers put in place that make it hard for someone who is of lower income to be successful. It's really, really hard to get an education in this country because it's really, really expensive. It's really, really hard to be successful in this country because it's very difficult to get a job without an education. It's really, really, really hard to have a certain amount of income when minimum wage isn't even like more than $15 in the national average.
Girl.
And the reality is every state is not actually paying everyone $15 yet.
Ma'am. Yeah.
Right? And it's not that the federal government is in charge of every single thing. Each individual state has its own policies and procedures that you have to adhere to. So the reality is it is quite difficult to be successful in America.
But I also think that I would be unfair to say that there's also not a lack of empathy on our level from person to person.
Oh, of course.
Like, I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that it might not be due to a socioeconomic standard.
People are really, really hurting. There's a lot of pain and a lot of trauma that we are not addressing within our own individual selves, within our family units, within our communities. At the end of the day, it is incredibly difficult to want to care about another human being when you feel like the entire world is out to get you.
Yes.
It's really, really hard. And a lot of communities have hurts. A lot of people have hurts. A lot of families have hurts. And these wounds are just festering generation to generation to generation. And we're expecting people to want to build more community when that same community has that's hurt people, and we haven't addressed it. We haven't talked about it. We have not healed. You know, we haven't reconciled the past. It's really challenging. You know, I think that there needs to be a reckoning. There needs to be a healing at the individual level, at the community level, at every level, because there's also a deep distrust of government. And that's state and federal, right? And you might think that it doesn't correlate with someone's individual hurt, but it does. It does. Everything matters in the grand scheme of things. But ultimately, I think it's really hard for people to soften their hearts when their hearts are burdened. You know, people are in pain.
I will say, though, and I think that one of the things that you said, that people have traumas that go unaddressed, part of me also wonders if they go unaddressed intentionally, right? I think that we've come to a place in society where we're using grievances as currency, right? So because of my trauma, I get to be morally unlicensed in this area of my life. You know what I'm saying? Because of what I've been through, the world has to make space and accommodate me, right? Even if it means my accommodations mean that someone else does not get to be accommodated whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wonder if using our trauma as a form of currency, or even as the staple of our identities, if that is what is governing like a lot of our decision making, a lot of our interactions, and ultimately, a lot of our willingness to untie, to unbind, to unconnect from others.
That's a really interesting thought. I don't know if it's a majority or minority, but there's a very loud group of people in our nation right now who are weaponizing their grievances, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that it suits people to not heal, but rather to use their grievance as means to further their own goals. You know, I think that does manifest a lot. But at the same time, I think that there are also people who don't know how to address their pain, and who just weaponize it just simply as means of defense, right? And I cannot quantify, you know, the difference between the two. But I think right now we are really promoting a strange culture of like, if you don't like something, you can do something about it. And don't get me wrong, you can and you should do something about it. But is it you on your own, or is this a community issue? I think there's also something to be said for making sure that we're not weaponizing something based on our own individual beliefs, but rather seeing if there's a systemic issue. Like, I think there's something to be said that to keep a community lens on everything, but that's not necessarily what we're promoting in society right now. I think right now it's more so like, you don't like something, so you do something about it, and you change your future for yourself. Whereas it's not just about our individual selves, right? We're like growing, like people are bringing children into this world. Like, what kind of world do we want to have for the children who are born right now, who are being born, who are going to be conceived? I think it just depends. But you're right. There are people who are making a strong, concerted effort to wear their grievances on their sleeve and identify as their grievance. However, there are also people who just don't know what to do, who just are so wounded. They're literally like exposed nerves on a very windy day. Like, they just don't know what to do. They have no other, I don't want to say they have no other options, but they cannot fathom other options other than to defend themselves.
I don't know if I agree with that last part. I feel, well, to some extent, yes, right? I feel like we're living also in a day and age where people know their exposed nerves. Mm-hmm. And instead of making the effort to heal it, instead of making the effort to do better, they commercialize it, they monetize it. I think this is a very low level scale, and this might be a very poor example, but it's the only one that pops into my mind right now. I think of YouTubers and influencers, right? I think of the Danae Jacksons.
Yeah, that's exactly what came to mind.
Like, she's gone through something horrible. That marriage was really a marriage from hell. It's as bad. Yeah. Or it could get worse, but it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
And instead of being like, I want to heal, I want to move forward with it, I'm offering courses as to how to turn your pain into profit. That's the tagline.
Yeah.
And that's how so many people are moving, right? It's not, I'm going to learn from this, be better, and hopefully teach my daughter and the next person not to fall into the same trap. It's pay me, monetize me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that you can hopefully be better.
Yeah. I do feel like that's a loud minority, though. I think that right now we really are promoting entrepreneurship. Like, I think entrepreneurship has become the thing.
I feel like it's a little perverted these days.
It is very perverted, but people are monetizing themselves. Like, just like you said, their traumas, their pains, their wounds, and people are paying for it. And this is what I mean when I say that there are some people who don't know what to do. So by means of defense, right, they're going to pay this money to listen to somebody who's experiencing something similar, but not necessarily the same. I think you're right about the generalizations, but to your point, though, I think that it is really hard to shift into a more community style lens if you can't make a generalization. I think there is a certain need to kind of be able to say that even though this doesn't necessarily pertain to me, I can support it just because it's for the good of people like me, or for people who I care about, or for people who, I want to live a better life. I think it's a really slippery slope. It's a very fine line between the two. But I also see your point of, there are a lot of ways to heal that are not monetizing your healing. That being said, I don't think that is the majority of people. I think that we have like, oh my God, America is like nation of the loud minority.
Yes.
It's like 2% of people live in that kind of lifestyle, and they're so loud. Oh my God. Like, how many influencers do we really have? It's probably not a lot, but they're so loud. You see them on the TV now. They're getting commercials. They're all over Instagram. They're on TikTok. They're everywhere. But in reality, right, most of America is working a 9-to-5 job, or like 8 to 4 or whatever. Like, most people are employed by another entity. So it's not the majority of people who are living this existence. I don't even know how many individual businesses exist in this country. I don't think the government knows, because there's a lot of unsanctioned business happening. But I take your point that, unfortunately though, it seems like nowadays you can monetize this pain, right? But that doesn't mean that most people are doing that. I think most people are like either like not sure what to do, cannot afford to get help, or like literally don't even know they need it. But their souls are empathizing with other people who are making like weird decisions. You know, like you know what I mean? It's really easy to like drown out your own pain with TV and books and social media. It's super easy to do that.
Or I think it's very easy to have someone else be at the microphone for your pain. And I think of like the Kevin Samuels of the world. Oh my God, right?
Yes.
Because I'm like, I earnestly did not know before Kevin Samuels got on the scene that there were so many men that were low-key angry at women. And I was like, wow. And I was like, no, literally, I was like, wow. Because he would say things, and I'm like, well, that's ludicrous. And I'm like, no one with a sane mind is going to agree. And then you have people like, yes.
To the woodworks.
And I'm like, where are these numbers coming from? Almost like it's scary. But yeah, I think that because they are everywhere nowadays, even though it's a small percentage, and I think that's also the problem. You're right. It's there. We are the country of loud minorities, but they're so loud that I think of the children who hear their voices.
Oh my God, yes.
And then think
and internalize that.
Yeah, that's the right way to do it. That's because now I think of. I work with kids. You know this. I'm like, you'll see kids nowadays who are like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" An influencer. I'm like, what? What is that? What do they do?
What are you influencing?
Right. What? And I'm like, it's scary. You know what I'm saying? Like, it concerns me. And then on the other end of the spectrum, because we're also in the nation of the lack of nuance, but we'll have two loud spectrums. The other end of the spectrum is also over empathizing, but on like the superficial level.
Oh, yeah.
And yet our government, our laws, our legislations, our regular day-to-day policies don't reflect that level of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, and maybe if we did that in our legislation, we could, have everyone have a space and do it safely. Right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is very true. I think that there's something to be said for forgetting people when we're trying to accomplish a goal. It reminds me, oh my God, this is so bad, but it reminds me of how, back in the day, like when America was a very young nation, right? When women and black men, like all women and black men specifically, were not allowed to vote. The only people who were allowed to vote were white men. It reminds me of that because if you remember, the women's suffrage movement petitioned to allow black men to vote first. Like they wanted to get that point off. And then do you think those black men turned around and campaigned for those white women and black women to be able to? No, that's not, no. So it's so weird that came to my mind, but it reminds me that a lot of the time we will forget where we've come from. And I think it's really like, I was talking to, my nieces, and they were saying to me, like, why does history, I don't want to learn about history. This is why history matters, right?
Yes,
because
ma'am.
History tends to repeat itself. And I think that when we talk about societal issues of inequity, right? if we talk about one without talking about the other, we hammer one point home or one group home, and we don't talk about others, right? It is really easy to forget that other people are also experiencing disparities.
Yes.
And that is the detriment of our society. And I blame Congress. I also blame the media.
I blame the media,
The
bro.
media is such a slippery, dangerous slope because they only talk about, first of all, what they care about. Let's start there. Second of all, they only talk about it to a certain point, and they beat the same time. If you watch CNN,
girl,
they cover the same
thing
topic
from
for 8 a.m. to 12 midnight. What's that about?
I'm like, so all of you had the same project and topics? No one
There's
said,
a lot happening in the world to talk about.
There's a lot happening in the U.S.
Yes.
There's enough for every hour to cover different
something
information.
else. And I think that we're doing a disservice to every community experiencing what is the word? Disparity. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of communities experiencing disparities.
My friend actually, she pointed this out, and I love that she said this because it really opened my eyes. This was a few years back, when Trump was running for office.
Yeah.
When we all thought it was a ludicrous, situation.
Oh Lord.
But she goes, we talk about a lot of black and white issues.
Oh yeah.
She goes, this nation is not black and white, though.
No.
She goes, there's yellow, there is brown, there's so much going on.
Yes.
She goes, can we talk about the communities who are also being attacked for existing? Because it's not just black folks.
It's not.
It's not just certain, it's also not certain sexual preference groups.
Yes.
She was like, we often talk about the LGBTQ plus, we talk about the blacks. She goes, what of the Native American women who have been missing, who have been violated and gone missing?
Yes.
Like in this one group, I think in the U.S., she was like, in this one area, I think she said in 3 years, over 20 women from that one place disappeared. Not one was looked into. They were all classified as runaways, right? And they all happen to be Native American. Yeah. Then you have the Gabby Petito's of the world who go missing.
Yeah.
And the world stops, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with media that focuses on specific groups and specific incidences is that we're uneducated in the disparities that other people are going through.
Yeah.
Right. So then it becomes, Black Lives Matter. Yes, very, very true.
Yes.
But Native American and
Native
women
American lives matter,
right?
too.
Like these other lives matter too. And please do not think I'm diminishing the Black Lives
That's
Matter
not
slogan.
what we're doing,
That's not what we're doing.
Disclaimer alert.
Right. But I'm like, but she brought it into such perspective.
Yeah.
Because she was like, we're often talking about the struggles that these groups go for. And she was like, and I love that we talk about Black Matters because yes, like she was like, if they get it, then we should all be able to get it, right? Mm-hmm. But she was like, but it's a huge disservice to the rest of us.
Yes.
Because I don't know what someone in the Filipino community is going through.
Right.
I don't know what someone in the Sri Lankan community is going through.
Right.
And they're also going through quite a bit.
Yeah.
And those are our neighbors.
Yeah.
Those are our classmates, our coworkers.
Yeah. And this is why I know it's a tactic, right? Because let's be clear. We might not all be the same people, but we can all empathize that we be going through it.
Yep.
And if all communities of color, right, or if all communities of like sexual preference and sexual orientation and gender identity, right, if we all came together, we all decided that we are gonna have we are going to issue a statement and we're gonna demand rights for A, B, C, and we like list it all out, right? Do you understand how powerful that would be? They don't want us to see eye to eye. They don't want us to empathize with each other. And I'm not trying to, echo the chorus because of the theys. I'll be very specific. The government does not want all of us to be friends, because if we're all friends, the people in government who are in government ain't going to be in government anymore. Okay. Right. We're going to find different people who are going to accomplish the goals that we see fit. Right. And that's the sad thing. This is the part that we're missing when we alienate different people's experiences. Everyone's experience matters.
If only we could challenge ourselves on the individual level to remember that.
Yeah.
When we walk into our classrooms, into our places of employment, all of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I wonder what a difference it would make to remember that this person is also going through something.
Right.
And this is the last point I'll hammer out, and this is because we've been on the days. I'm sure this is going to be considered a conspiracy podcast, but because you said something earlier, which is empathy is the ability to see someone for who they are, not necessarily the mistakes, right? I truly believe, and this, you know what? This might be a conspiracy theory for me. The internet is probably one of the worst things. It's good and bad, but it's one of the worst things for, I think, empathy, for human connection, like genuine human connection. And I don't mean like me knowing what Gwen Stefani is doing on Monday. I mean me being able to be like, that person is a human being with parents, with sisters, she's gone through things, etc.
Yeah.
And I say this because I think a great example of this is an example I will always use. I cannot help but think of the Kevin Hart situation when he goes for the Oscars, right? Mm-hmm. In 2010, when language was not so politically correct, when the LGBTQ plus community was not the force that it was.
Yes.
I'm like, he made jokes. But what comedian didn't, really?
Everyone was making jokes.
He gets offered, maybe a decade later,
the
opportunity to host the Oscars.
Right.
And they go back 10 years
to
pull up jokes that he has long since moved on from, apologized for, grown from, etc.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because I'm like, I think it's especially dangerous when man thinks that they can create something immortal.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that the internet is the first version of that, the first immortal thing that we've ever created.
Yeah.
So we're always looking at someone's past version of self. I will never know the Margaret of today.
Right.
I will always know the Margaret of 10 years ago based on her tweets, etc. I get to pick and choose which Margaret I choose to try and empathize with.
Right.
Because it's very easy to go back into my past and say she's not worth empathizing with.
Right.
She's not a good person.
Oh, yeah.
She's ignorant. She's narcissistic. She was also 17.
Right.
We'll throw that under the rug.
Child.
She was not fully formed in the mind.
Right.
And that's not to discredit or take away from the actions that someone does, right? But I think it is tremendously dangerous when we start picking and choosing pieces of the past, pieces of the person that we get to meet.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I talk about, although social media gave us proximity, it does not give us familiarity.
That's very true.
Because we get to be familiar with someone when you grow with them, when you meet them presently.
Right.
But I think that we've confused our familiarity with people from people of the past.
Right.
People who no longer exist.
Right.
And I think it's extremely dangerous because that allows us to pick and choose who we get to empathize with, who we get to call human, who we get to be like, this is who I'm going to put my my vote behind, etc. Because they're not people that we know anymore. They're people that don't exist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and we choose to skate over all the accomplishments, all the growing that person has done.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that the internet is a very dangerous place. And it's not just because we are digging up people's past and we are not making room for evolution, right?
Yep.
It's not even just that. It's also the fact that in life, we have no genuine human connection anymore, right? It is very rare that you go hang out with people that you've never met or people like you wouldn't know and nobody's on their phone. Nobody's surfing the net. Like nowadays, it's really, really hard to get to know people in real life.
Yeah. It has to be predominantly done through the internet.
Right. Like you're getting to know this persona. We don't even date in real life. We're like on apps trying to find people nowadays.
Which I detest, but another story.
But like, it's crazy to me how detrimental these platforms have been. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of benefit to them. Like we have connections to people across the world in ways that we would have never had if it wasn't for the internet. But at the same time, if I meet you in real life, can we have a real life conversation if we're both on our phones or we're both surfing the internet or we're both wondering about this headline and that headline? Yep. Like, are we really forging genuine human connection? First of all, Gen Z? Yeah. Gen Z don't even leave they're not even leaving the house. Like, they're not driving. They're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean, like, look at what we've done. We're raising children who don't know how to have social interaction.
Keyword, don't know how. because you will drop a kid into like a situation now that they don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do.
They don't know how to break the ice. Back in the day, you used to go up to the playground and just start balling with whoever was on the court.
They don't even go outside anymore.
Girl.
They're on the games, on the little computer games and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you put them in real life and they don't know what to do. They just sit in real life playing computer games with each other.
And you know what it is? The anxiety as well.
It is.
These kids are anxious.
They're anxious.
Yeah.
They very much are.
Yep.
And, you know, we have to hold ourselves accountable to what we're breeding when we are allowing the internet to hold us hostage.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
It's unfortunate. And to your other point, I think that there is something really wrong with the idea that you have to like be beholden to who you were. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should be using like racial slurs or things like that. Like, those are the things that you definitely are going to be apologizing for a very long time. That being said, I think there's something to be said for growing and evolving. I think people can learn and change over time. The thoughts and ideas that I had when I was 16 are not the thoughts and ideas that I have at 27.
Girl, I wouldn't even recognize that girl.
I don't even want to be held responsible for that girl, even though I was that girl.
I was that girl. And I willingly am willing to take up the yoke, the burden of, you know, taking up the actions for her. But I really wish I didn't have to.
Right.
Because they're embarrassing.
They're embarrassing.
They're ignorant. They're naive. Keyword naive. And I'm like, and we don't give each other the space to grow. We don't.
We don't.
And you know what I think it is? It's because it's similar to, you know how life imitates art and vice versa? Mm-hmm. Life right now to me is imitating the internet. And because the internet cannot, you know, cannot empathize, we too are starting to lack the ability to empathize and really, truly connect. So I'll ask, since you're the social worker, what can we do to be more empathetic? What can we do to start bridging the gap?
I think, firstly, I'm really big on internal healing. I think that, first of all, oh my God, I need every company to make therapy like as close to free or affordable as possible, and that should be scaled to whatever the wage is for each individual person on staff.
Okay, somebody.
Because at the end of the day, like, we cannot ask people to be better people if they're not good on the inside, if they're not okay internally. And at the end of the day, I just think it's really hard to afford therapy. It's expensive. I'm not gonna sit up in here and tell y'all it ain't pricey. It's costing me a lot of money.
Girl.
And we need to make it accessible to more people. We also need to normalize it in our communities. It does not make you crazy. It does not mean that you don't believe in Jesus Christ. Let me tell you something. Jesus Christ is a therapist, but Jesus Christ also created therapists.
I think he
Go
went
to therapy.
therapy. I feel like I want to.
Yeah, he was counseled by his father.
Right. I really want to believe that the whole, like, he was at, when he was at, was it Gethsemane? No, which mountaintop was it when they was about to take him? He was like, I really don't want to do this.
Yes.
And they was like, let's talk through it, shall we? I'm like,
yes. I think at the end of the day, we need to allow people to get the help that they need. We need to stop judging people and thinking that, oh, we don't do that, you know, in the Christian faith, there's no such thing. Oh my God, y'all. Yes, God did not give us the spirit of fear, but it didn't say that fear does not exist, y'all. Even Jesus Christ was afraid to die. Oh my goodness. Like, what is up? We need to allow, and I don't care if it's spiritual counseling. I don't care what it is. Go to counseling, get help. And I think that, you know, pick better friends. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't just have city girlfriends. Have prayerful friends. Have the friends that's going to pray for you and with you.
Give you a word.
You know what I'm saying?
And
like,
give you a stream of consciousness.
Exactly.
Like you were saying, that helps lift your own.
Right. Have friends who can share your burdens with you. You know what I'm saying? We need to also be very, very, very strategic with what we're doing on the internet.
Yes.
If you have a Finsta, delete it. If you can't say it with your big chest, don't say it. Because you don't need to be saying it.
That's probably what that really is.
My goodness. Like, what's going on? If you wouldn't say it to me directly, don't say it to me on the internet. And I think that people need to be very strategic with what platforms they're even on. If you have a problem with comparison, you should not be on Instagram.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to be on Instagram, be very selective with who you follow. Because at the end of the day, no two people are walking the same path. I don't know what journey God has them on, but I know what journey God has me on. And it looks different. It walks and talks differently. And I think that we just need to give each other more grace. You know what I'm saying? If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. You don't have to have a conversation immediately. You can take a deep breath and say, you know what? I'm not feeling well. Let's talk tomorrow. Or I've heard what you said. I want to think about my response. I want you to know that I care about you, and I will be in touch, you know, when I have formulated my rebuttal. You know, there's a lot to be said for giving yourself the space and the grace to think before you speak and to think before you act. And I think the last thing that I can really say is just keep hope alive. Because even though things are really shaky right now, I genuinely believe that with time, things are going to get better.
We can only hope.
I do think so. I just think that we individually need to grow and evolve and allow ourselves the opportunity to feel our emotions, to experience our emotions, to believe what we believe, and then seek community, because that's a big thing.
So we're going to challenge you guys to just do better, be better. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, but it's the best kind of work.
It really is. It really is.
So I will say thank you, Margaret, for joining us. At this point, I'm like, we should appoint her at some place in government to have these things work out. Margaret is like, no, I do not. I'm not trying to do that.
I'm trying to go to heaven. Don't put me up there.
Girl.
I know where I'm going.
She goes, I'm taking the path forward. Come on, somebody. Be sure to go ahead and follow Amoka Photos on Instagram. She also has an incredible blog. It sends chills down my spine every single time when she posts, which is like twice a quarter.
Hey.
You don't need to be baptized every year, but twice a quarter is nice as well. It'll be changing your life and your perspective. It's not even a dig. This is for real. I'm like, it is really a blessing, and it always is just right to the heart. So I feel like it's like your ministry work. Like, I love it.
I pray so.
No, I think it is. I think those who read it are blessed. Now, if you want to go and catch your blessings, you're going to go ahead and tune in to her blogs. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share your thoughts on how empathetic you think the world is and how we can be better all together. This has been Esther Alexis with Body of an Extrovert. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.